what if the things you've been hiding, the habits you thought made you weird, are actually the clearest signs that you are thinking deeper, feeling more intensely, and living more consciously than most people around you? Most people move through life carrying ideas that were handed to them long before they were capable of questioning them. Beliefs about success, relationships, identity, and even happiness are often absorbed quietly, repeated unconsciously, and defended fiercely, not because they are true, but because they are familiar. But if you are someone who pauses in the middle of what everyone else seems to accept so easily, if you feel a subtle resistance when something doesn't quite make sense, then you are already stepping outside that invisible agreement. You are interrupting the automatic flow, and that interruption, as small as it may seem, changes everything. You don't just hear statements, you examine them. When someone says, "This is how life works," something in you asks, "According to whom?" When you're told, "This is the right path," your mind responds with, "Why is this the right path? And for who exactly?" These questions are not always welcomed. In fact, they often create discomfort in others, because questioning a shared belief can feel like threatening a shared reality. People may interpret your curiosity as doubt, your reflection as resistance, or your silence as disagreement. And sometimes, to avoid that tension, you might even pretend to agree, but internally, the questioning never stops. This way of thinking can make the world feel more complex than it appears to others. While many people find comfort in certainty, you often find yourself standing in the space between possibilities. You notice contradictions, the way people say one thing but live another, the way systems promise fairness but operate differently, the way traditions are preserved without being understood. These observations don't come from negativity, they come from awareness. You are not trying to break things apart for the sake of it. You are trying to see them clearly without distortion. There is also a quiet loneliness that can come with this. Not because you are alone, but because your inner dialogue rarely matches the external conversation. While others may be satisfied with quick answers, you are still exploring the question. While they move forward with certainty, you hesitate, not out of fear, but out of a desire to understand more deeply. And in a world that values speed and decisiveness, that hesitation can be misunderstood as weakness, when in reality it is a form of intellectual honesty. At times, this constant questioning can become exhausting. You may wish, even briefly, that you could just accept things as they are and move on, that you could silence the voice that keeps asking for clarity, that keeps pulling you back into reflection. But that voice is not a flaw. It is a signal. It is the part of you that refuses to live on borrowed truths. It is the part that seeks alignment between what you believe and what actually makes sense to you. And because of this, your journey often looks different. You may take longer to make decisions, not because you are indecisive, but because you are unwilling to choose blindly. You may change your mind more often, not because you lack direction, but because you are refining your understanding. You may even walk away from things that seem perfectly acceptable to others, simply because something within you doesn't resonate. These choices are not always easy, and they are rarely comfortable, but they are deeply intentional. In a world where many people inherit their worldview without examination, your willingness to question is a form of quiet independence. It means you are not just living, you are actively participating in the construction of your own perspective. And while this path may not offer the immediate comfort of certainty, it offers something far more valuable: the possibility of living a life that actually feels true to you. There are moments when you find yourself surrounded by people who know you, places that should feel familiar, conversations that follow expected patterns, and yet something inside you remains slightly distant, as if you are present physically but observing internally. It is not a rejection of others, nor is it a lack of interest. It is a subtle awareness that what is happening on the surface is only part of the experience, and your attention naturally drifts toward what lies beneath it. While others engage effortlessly, you notice pauses, tones, unspoken tensions, the quiet details that reveal more than the words themselves. And in that awareness, you begin to feel like you are standing just a step outside the moment, watching it unfold rather than fully dissolving into it. This feeling often creates confusion, not only within you but also in the way others perceive you. People may assume you are distracted, distant, or even uninterested because your engagement does not always look like theirs. You may not react quickly, laugh at the same moments, or contribute in predictable ways. Instead, you take in the atmosphere, you analyze the dynamics, you sense the emotional undercurrents that others might overlook. Your silence is not emptiness, it is processing. Your stillness is not disconnection. It is awareness stretching itself across layers that are not immediately visible. Even in environments where you are supposed to feel most comfortable, there can be an unexpected sense of not fully belonging. Family gatherings, social events, familiar routines, they all carry an underlying structure that most people accept without question. But for you, that structure can feel limiting, almost as if it expects you to play a role that does not completely reflect who you are becoming. You may participate, you may smile, you may follow along, but there is always a part of you that remains observant, quietly asking whether this is truly where you fit or simply where you have learned to exist. This inner distance does not come from superiority or detachment, but from sensitivity to authenticity. You are not satisfied with interactions that feel automatic or rehearsed. Small talk, superficial exchanges, or predictable conversations can leave you feeling even more disconnected, not because they're wrong, but because they do not reach the depth you instinctively seek. You crave moments where people speak honestly, where silence is allowed to exist without pressure, where connection is not forced but naturally unfolds. And when those moments are absent, the gap between you and the environment becomes more noticeable. There is also a certain tension in wanting to belong while simultaneously resisting anything that feels inauthentic. You might find yourself trying to engage more, to align with the rhythm of those around you, to silence the part of your mind that keeps observing instead of simply participating. But that effort often feels unnatural, as if you are temporarily stepping into a version of yourself that does not fully fit. And when you return to your natural state of awareness, the contrast becomes even clearer. Over time, you begin to understand that this sense of being out of place is not necessarily a flaw, but a reflection of how you experience the world. You are not disconnected from people. You are connected in a different way. You perceive layers that are not immediately obvious, and that perception creates a unique relationship with your surroundings. It allows you to see complexity where others see simplicity, to recognize meaning where others see routine, and to remain aware even when everything around you encourages you to drift into automatic participation. For many people, being alone is something to avoid, a condition that quickly turns into discomfort, restlessness, or even anxiety. Silence feels heavy, time stretches too slowly, and the absence of distraction becomes almost unbearable. But if you are someone who is not normal in this sense, solitude transforms into something entirely different. It becomes a space that does not threaten you, but instead invites you inward. When the noise fades and the external demands quiet down, you do not feel emptiness. You feel access. Access to your own thoughts, your own emotions, and the parts of yourself that are often drowned out by constant interaction. You don't approach solitude as an escape from people, but as a return to yourself. There is a difference between isolation and intentional aloneness, and you feel that difference deeply. Isolation carries a sense of being cut off, of longing for connection that isn't there. But the solitude you experience is chosen, almost necessary, like a reset that allows your inner world to reorganize itself. It is where you make sense of conversations that didn't sit right, where you revisit moments that felt significant, where you process emotions that were too complex to fully understand in real time. When you are alone, Your mind does not go quiet in a dull or empty way. It becomes active, reflective, almost alive. Thoughts connect in ways they don't when you are surrounded by noise. You begin to see patterns in your behavior, to recognize emotional triggers, to question your own reactions with a level of honesty that is difficult to access in the presence of others. This is not always comfortable. There are moments when you confront aspects of yourself you would rather ignore, when the clarity that comes with solitude forces you to acknowledge things you have been avoiding. But even in that discomfort, there is a sense of truth that feels more valuable than temporary ease. People who do not understand this might assume that your preference for solitude means you are withdrawing from life or avoiding relationships. They might encourage you to get out more, to fill your time, to surround yourself with activity, but what they don't see is that your time alone is not empty. It is productive in a different way. It is where you build self-awareness, where you strengthen your sense of identity, where you reconnect with what actually matters to you beyond external expectations. Without that space, you would feel fragmented, as if you were constantly reacting to the world without ever understanding your place within it. There is also a certain peace that develops when you become comfortable in your own company. You are no longer dependent on constant validation, entertainment, or distraction to feel okay. You can sit with your thoughts without needing to escape them immediately. You can experience silence without interpreting it as something negative. This does not mean you don't value connection. It means your connection with yourself becomes the foundation upon which all other relationships are built. At times, this preference for solitude can create misunderstandings. Others may interpret it as distance, indifference, or even rejection. They may not realize that stepping away is often what allows you to return more present, more grounded, and more capable of genuine connection. Because when you give yourself the time to understand your own inner world, you are better equipped to engage with the outer one in a way that is not forced or superficial, but intentional and real. There are moments when something small happens, a brief conversation, a passing comment, a subtle shift in someone's tone, and while others move on from it almost instantly, your mind does something very different. It doesn't let go. It lingers, circles back, dissects every detail as if there is something hidden beneath the surface waiting to be uncovered. You replay the exact words, the pauses in between, the expressions that accompanied them. You begin to ask yourself what it meant, not just on the surface, but in intention, in implication, in emotion, and before you realize it, what lasted only seconds in reality becomes something that occupies your thoughts for hours. This tendency to overanalyze is often misunderstood, even by yourself. It can feel like a burden, like your mind refuses to rest, constantly searching for clarity where perhaps none is needed. You may wonder why you can't just let things pass, why you feel compelled to examine your own reactions so closely. But beneath that intensity is not weakness. It is a deep desire to understand yourself and the world with precision. You are not satisfied with vague explanations or surface-level interpretations. You want to know what is real, what is true, and what lies beneath your immediate perception. When you analyze your own thoughts, you are not simply thinking, you are observing yourself thinking. There is a second layer of awareness that watches your reactions unfold and questions them in real time or shortly after. You might ask yourself why a certain comment affected you more than it should have, why you reacted defensively, why something that seemed insignificant to others stayed with you. This internal dialogue can be relentless, but it is also incredibly revealing. It exposes patterns in your behavior, recurring emotional responses, and beliefs that operate quietly in the background of your decisions. At times, this depth of reflection can turn into overthinking that feels exhausting. You may find yourself trapped in loops, revisiting the same scenario again and again, trying to reach a conclusion that always seems just out of reach. There can be a sense of urgency to figure it out, as if clarity will bring relief. But the more you push, the more complex it can become, because every answer leads to another question. Every realization opens the door to a deeper layer. It can feel like trying to untangle something that keeps rearranging itself as you look at it. This process also extends beyond your own mind into the way you perceive others. You notice inconsistencies in behavior, shifts in energy, contradictions between what people say and what they do. You don't just hear words, you interpret intentions, emotions, and possible meanings behind them. This can make interactions feel richer, but also heavier, because you are constantly processing more information than what is immediately visible. While others may take things at face value, you are exploring the layers beneath, trying to understand the full picture rather than a simplified version of it. There is a certain vulnerability in this level of awareness. The more you analyze, the less you can ignore. You become aware of your own flaws, your own contradictions, the ways in which you sometimes act against your own values. This honesty can be uncomfortable, even painful at times, because it removes the illusion of simplicity. But it also creates the possibility for growth that is rooted in truth rather than assumption. People may tell you to stop overthinking, to relax, to not take things so seriously. And while there is value in learning to step back, what they often fail to see is that your mind is not trying to complicate things unnecessarily. It is trying to understand them completely. Your reflection is not random. It is directed by a need for coherence between what you feel, what you think, and what you experience. And even when it becomes overwhelming, it is still part of a deeper process of making sense of yourself in a world that often encourages you not to look too closely. There is a kind of quiet pressure that shapes most lives long before people become aware of it. It appears in expectations that seem reasonable, paths that seem secure, decisions that feel almost automatic because this is what people do. Education follows a certain order, careers are chosen based on stability or approval, relationships unfold according to patterns that have been repeated for generations, and for many, this structure offers comfort. It provides direction without the need for constant questioning. But if you are someone who resists following paths that don't feel right, this structure can feel less like guidance and more like confinement. You may find yourself standing at moments where a decision seems obvious to everyone else, yet something inside you hesitates. It is not always a loud resistance. Often it is subtle, almost difficult to explain. A sense that, although the choice makes sense on paper, it does not align with something deeper within you. This feeling can be frustrating because it lacks clear logic that can be easily communicated to others. When people ask why you are uncertain, you may struggle to give an answer that satisfies them because what you are responding to is not external evidence but internal dissonance. Choosing not to follow a predefined path often comes with consequences that are not immediately visible but deeply felt. There is uncertainty because stepping away from what is established means stepping into what is unknown. There is doubt because without external validation, you are left to rely on your own judgment. And there is often misunderstanding from others who may interpret your hesitation as fear, your change of direction as inconsistency, or your refusal as a lack of ambition. From the outside, it can look like you are complicating your life unnecessarily. From the inside, it feels like you are trying to avoid living a life that does not belong to you. This resistance is not about rejecting structure entirely, nor is it about opposing everything that is common or accepted. It is about alignment. You are not unwilling to commit. You are unwilling to commit blindly. You want your choices to reflect something real within you, not just something that looks correct from the outside. This means that sometimes you walk away from opportunities that others would consider ideal. Sometimes you delay decisions that seem urgent. Sometimes you change direction after realizing that what once felt right no longer does. These actions can create instability in the short term, but they are driven by a deeper need for authenticity. There is also a certain courage required to continue listening to that inner signal, especially when it contradicts the voices around you. It would be easier to follow along, to silence the discomfort, to convince yourself that it doesn't matter as much as it feels like it does. And at times, you may even try to do that, to fit yourself into expectations that don't quite match who you are. But over time, that misalignment becomes harder to ignore. It shows up as restlessness, as a lack of motivation, as a quiet sense that something is off even when everything appears to be in place. By resisting paths that don't resonate, you are not choosing chaos. You are choosing responsibility. Responsibility for your own direction, your own decisions, your own sense of meaning. It is a more demanding way of living because it removes the comfort of simply following what has already been decided. It requires you to continuously evaluate, to adjust, to remain honest with yourself, even when that honesty leads to difficult choices. And while this path may not always look stable or predictable, it is shaped by intention rather than imitation, by a desire to live in a way that feels true rather than merely acceptable. There is a quiet but persistent difference between those who seek comfort and those who seek meaning. Comfort is immediate, accessible, and often encouraged by the world around you. It asks very little in return, only that you avoid discomfort, follow what feels easy, and remain within the boundaries that keep life predictable. Meaning, on the other hand, is far less accommodating. It does not present itself clearly, it cannot be forced, and it often requires you to move through uncertainty, confusion, and even discomfort before it reveals anything of value. If you are someone who is not normal in this sense, you begin to notice that comfort, while pleasant, is not enough to sustain you. You may experience moments where everything in your life appears stable, where nothing is particularly wrong, and yet there is a subtle dissatisfaction that you cannot easily explain. It is not a dramatic emptiness, but a quiet sense that something is missing. You might look at your routine, your surroundings, even your achievements, and feel that they lack a certain depth. This feeling can be confusing, especially when there is no clear problem to solve. Others might tell you that you should be grateful, that what you have is enough, and on some level, you know they are right. But the part of you that seeks meaning is not asking whether things are sufficient. It is asking whether they are significant. This desire leads you to question not only what you are doing, but why you are doing it. You begin to look beyond outcomes and focus on purpose. A task completed successfully is no longer satisfying if it feels empty in intention. A goal achieved does not bring fulfillment if it does not align with something that matters to you on a deeper level. This perspective changes the way you approach life. You are less motivated by external rewards and more driven by internal coherence, by the sense that your actions are connected to something that resonates with your values and your understanding of what matters. Choosing meaning over comfort often introduces a level of difficulty that others may not fully understand. It requires you to sit with questions that do not have immediate answers, to remain in situations that challenge you rather than avoid them, to explore paths that are uncertain instead of staying within what is safe. While comfort offers quick relief, meaning demands patience. It unfolds slowly, often through experiences that test your assumptions, stretch your perspective, and force you to confront aspects of yourself that are not always easy to accept. There is also a certain isolation that can accompany this pursuit. Not everyone is looking for the same depth, and not everyone feels the same need to understand life beyond its surface. You may find that conversations often stay at a level that does not fully engage you, that environments designed for ease feel limiting, that choices driven by convenience do not hold your attention for long. This does not mean you reject these things entirely, but they do not satisfy you in the way they seem to satisfy others. You are searching for something that cannot be easily defined, something that goes beyond immediate pleasure or short-term stability. Over time, you begin to realize that meaning is not something you find once and hold onto permanently. It is something that evolves, something that shifts as you grow and change. What felt meaningful at one stage of your life may no longer feel the same later on, and this requires you to continuously re-examine your direction. It is not a fixed destination, but an ongoing process of alignment between who you are and how you choose to live. This process can be demanding because it does not allow you to settle into complacency for too long, and it constantly asks for your attention, your honesty, and your willingness to adapt